Welcome to the Growth Blueprint Podcast, your go-to guide for mastering personal and financial growth.
Hey everyone, ready to dive into something really useful today? We're talking budgeting.
Budgeting?
But don't worry, we are not going to make anybody feel guilty about that latte they bought this morning.
Absolutely not.
We are going to be diving into NerdWallet's How to Budget Money, a 5-step guide. We're going to extract the good stuff so you can actually stick to a plan.
Exactly. And this guide is so practical. And you know what I think is really cool about it? It emphasizes psychology as much as math.
Okay.
Because it recognizes that sticking to a budget, that's the hard part.
Yeah.
It's not just adding up the numbers.
For sure. First things first, they break it down into 5 super clear steps.
Okay.
We're talking figuring out your income.
Yeah.
Picking a budgeting style that fits you. Yes, there are options.
There are.
Tracking your progress without going crazy.
Right. And even automating your savings like a boss.
You're speaking my language. And you know what else is crucial here?
What's that?
Their emphasis on budget management as an ongoing process.
Okay.
This isn't set it and forget it. Life changes.
Right.
Your budget should too.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Because how many times have you made like a New Year's resolution budget?
Oh, yeah.
And then like February rolls around and you're like,
Exactly.
yeah, I don't even remember what I was doing.
And this is where they get it.
Okay.
They get that it's got to be flexible. It's got to change.
And get this, they even delve into prioritizing where your money should go.
Yes.
Because let's be real, sometimes it feels like a financial fire drill.
Oh, it totally does. It's like, where do I even start?
Right.
What's the most important thing?
Yeah. Is it that credit card bill? Is it rent? Right. And they tell you, they actually give you a game plan.
Hey, tell me more.
So NerdWallet, they break down the process into 5, like you said, digestible steps.
Yeah.
And it starts with really understanding your income.
Okay. So you got to know what you're working with.
Exactly. You got to know what you're working with before you can even begin to make a plan.
Makes sense.
And then comes choosing a budgeting style.
Okay.
Because, believe it or not,
Okay.
one size does not fit all
Interesting.
when it comes to managing your money.
Okay. Now, this is where I get interested. What kind of budgeting styles are we talking about? Because I feel like people think budget and they just think like spreadsheet. Yeah. Right. And it's so much more than that.
Okay.
So some people, they thrive on spreadsheets. They love meticulously tracking every penny.
I could see that.
For some people.
Yeah, they love the details, but others, they prefer a more visual approach.
Okay.
Like the envelope system. Have you heard of that?
I have heard of that.
So you're actually, dividing your cash into different categories.
Yeah.
And it's a way to really visualize where your money's going.
So you're not just like swiping a card and hoping for the best.
Exactly. And the key here is finding what works for your personality.
Okay.
And your habits.
Because if you're someone who loves to just like look at your banking app, maybe the envelope system's not for you.
Exactly.
But if you're someone who forgets to check in and you need something.
Visual.
Yeah.
That's more tangible. Maybe that's a good option.
I can see myself getting overwhelmed with too much detail. So I'm definitely intrigued by these different approaches.
Yeah, and they go through a bunch of them in this guide, so that's really helpful.
Okay, so you've nailed down your budgeting style. What comes next?
That's where the action starts.
Okay.
Tracking your expenses.
Okay, so now we're getting into the nitty-gritty.
We are, but don't worry.
Okay.
This doesn't mean becoming obsessed with receipts.
Okay, because nobody wants to spend their Friday night categorizing grocery receipts.
Exactly. They emphasize finding a system that helps you stay aware of your spending without feeling overwhelmed.
Okay, because that's the thing. If it's too much, you're just not going to do it.
You're going to abandon it. Exactly.
So are we talking apps, spreadsheets? Like, what are we talking here?
They cover all of that. From high-tech budgeting apps to good old-fashioned notebooks, they offer suggestions for every comfort level.
I like that.
Yeah, they meet you where you are.
Okay.
And here's where it gets really interesting. They emphasize automating your savings. Automating.
Tell me more.
Think of it like this. You set up automatic transfers to your savings or investment accounts each month.
Okay.
And voila.
You're rich.
Well, I wish. Not quite rich, but you're building your financial future.
Okay.
Without even thinking about it.
So it's like tricking yourself into saving money?
Precisely. It's like tricking yourself into good habits.
I like that.
Yeah. And speaking of tricking yourself into good habits, NerdWallet also dives into the often overlooked aspect of prioritizing your spending.
You mean like actually figuring out where my hard-earned cash should be going instead of just watching it disappear every month?
You got it.
Okay.
And this is where NerdWallet, I think, gets really insightful.
Okay.
You see, most people assume paying off debt should be at the very top of the list.
Which makes sense. Get rid of those loans ASAP.
Right. It seems intuitive, but NerdWallet presents a different perspective, and this is where their approach gets really interesting.
So are you saying ditching debt isn't the top priority? What could be more important than getting those loan sharks off our backs?
Well, NerdWallet argues that before you can even think about tackling debt, you need a solid financial foundation.
Okay.
And that starts with a small emergency fund.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like trying to build a house on a shaky foundation. You're just asking for trouble.
Exactly. Unexpected expenses like a car repair or a medical bill can completely derail your finances and even push you further into debt if you're not prepared.
Oh, I've been there. That feeling of dread when your car makes a funny noise and you already know it's going to be a pricey fix.
The worst.
Yeah.
And that's where NerdWallet emphasizes the importance of having a small cushion to absorb those financial shocks.
Okay.
It reduces stress and it prevents those unexpected expenses from turning into major setbacks.
It's like having a financial safety net.
Precisely. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
They argue that even before tackling your debt, you should prioritize something else that might surprise you.
Okay, now you've got me on the edge of my seat. What could possibly be more important than slaying that debt monster?
Drumroll, please. It's your 401k. Specifically, taking full advantage of your employer match.
You're saying retirement savings trumps paying off debt? I'll admit, I'm a little surprised by this.
I know it sounds counterintuitive, right? But think of it this way. That employer match is essentially free money.
Okay.
It's like getting a guaranteed return on your investment that you won't find anywhere else.
You know, you're right. I used to think my 401k could wait until I was older and making more money, but once I realized how much that employer match was actually worth, it was a no-brainer.
Exactly. And here's where it gets even more compelling. The power of compound interest.
Oh, yeah.
The earlier you start investing,
Right.
even small amounts, the more time that money has to grow exponentially over the long term.
It's like that old saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today.
Exactly. Yeah. But don't worry, NerdWallet doesn't forget about debt entirely.
Okay.
They do eventually address it in their guide.
Good.
And they make a crucial distinction between different types of debt.
Okay, tell us more. What kind of debt should we be tackling first?
They call out toxic debt,
Toxic debt.
which is a term you might have heard thrown around.
I have.
This isn't just about owing money.
Okay.
It's about the kind of debt that can trap you in a cycle of high-interest payments that feel impossible to escape.
That sounds pretty scary. What makes certain types of debt so toxic?
It's all about those interest rates.
Okay.
Think payday loans, title loans, or even those credit cards with sky-high interest rates.
Right.
These often come with rates that are significantly higher than other forms of debt, like student loans or mortgages.
Okay, those examples definitely ring a bell. I've always been warned about the dangers of payday loans, but I never quite understood why they were so much worse than, say, student loan debt.
It's all about how those interest rates compound.
Okay.
Let's say you borrow a small amount through a payday loan. The interest rates are so high that even if you make regular payments, you might find yourself barely making a dent in the principal balance.
So you're stuck in this endless cycle of paying off interest without actually making progress on the loan itself. That's a recipe for financial disaster. No wonder they call it toxic.
Exactly.
So NerdWallet says we need an emergency fund, prioritize that 401k match, and then attack that high-interest debt. Got it. But what about all the other stuff, the everyday expenses?
That's where their practical advice really shines.
So-
They introduced the 50-30-20 budget, a simple framework for allocating your after-tax income.
Okay.
It's not about restriction.
Okay.
It's about finding a sustainable balance for your money.
50-30-20. It sounds catchy, but break it down for me. What exactly falls into those categories?
It's actually pretty straightforward.
Okay.
50% of your after-tax income is dedicated to your needs. Think essentials like your rent or mortgage payments,
Okay.
groceries, utilities, transportation,
Right.
and any debt payments you might have.
Okay, so the non-negotiables, the things you absolutely need to keep a roof over your head and the lights on?
Precisely.
Gotcha.
Then we move on to the wants category,
Okay.
which makes up 30% of your budget.
Okay.
This is where you have a little more flexibility thinking, dining out, entertainment, hobbies, travel.
Right.
Those things that bring you joy but aren't strictly essential.
This is where I imagine things could get a little tricky. Distinguishing between a need and a want can feel subjective sometimes.
Absolutely. And that's where mindful spending comes in.
Okay.
NerdWallet encourages us to really examine our spending habits and ask ourselves, is this purchase truly adding value to my life?
Right.
Sometimes we might discover we're spending more in certain areas than we realize.
Yeah.
Or that there are areas where we can cut back without feeling deprived.
Confession time, the wants category is where I could probably use a little more discipline.
Well, that's the beauty of the 50-30-20 rule.
Yeah.
It's not about deprivation.
Right.
It's about finding a sustainable balance that aligns with your values and goals.
Okay.
Now, let's not forget about that last 20%. This is earmarked for savings and debt repayment.
So this is where we tackle any remaining debt that didn't fall under the toxic category, right?
Exactly. Things like student loans, car loans, or even a mortgage.
Right.
And of course, it also includes building up your savings beyond that initial emergency fund.
Okay.
Think long-term savings goals like retirement or even a down payment on a house.
I'm already starting to see how this framework could help me get a better handle on my money. It's not just about cutting back on lattes.
Right.
It's about making conscious choices about where my money is going and why.
That's the key takeaway. NerdWallet provides us with these practical tools and strategies. But the real power comes from understanding our own spending habits, priorities, and long-term goals.
Yeah.
The 50-30-20 method is a great starting point. But the beauty is that it can be adapted and personalized to fit your unique financial situation.
This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about, from the importance of that emergency fund to finally understanding why those toxic debts are so dangerous.
Right.
And how to prioritize my spending using the 50-70-20 rule. I feel like I've got a solid roadmap for taking control of my finances.
And remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The NerdWallet guide goes into even more detail about tracking your spending, automating your finances, and exploring different budgeting methods.
Right.
It's packed with resources and tools that can help you navigate the world of personal finance with confidence.
So for anyone listening who's ready to ditch the financial overwhelm and start building a more secure future, this NerdWallet guide is definitely worth a read. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, what's one small change you can make today to align your spending with your values and goals? Is it finally setting up that automatic transfer to your savings account, or maybe rethinking that online shopping spree? Remember, even small steps can make a big difference in the long run.